Well, is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything where you're like, I hope Charlie asks me this? You've been interviewed a number of times on podcasts, things like that. Um, yeah, so is there anything where you're always walking away going, I wish they'd ask me this one thing. No one ever asks me this.
I'm thinking. I mean, we can go down just for context, the how she got diagnosed
Sure.
to
Yeah.
kind of like, if someone is watching this for the first time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They might want to know what that process was like, because diagnosis of FTD is very difficult.
Okay.
And we struggled getting a diagnosis.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. So it's a very long story.
Okay.
And I'm going to disclose a lot about myself because my story ties very much into what happened with my mom and the timeline of it all.
Okay.
My mom officially got diagnosed early October of 2020 with FTD, frontotemporal degeneration or dementia, the behavioral variant. Very rare disease. Came out of nowhere. When we think back to what the earliest signs and symptoms were, I can think back years, a handful of years. Specifically in 2018, August of 2018, I got engaged. And it was a very quick engagement. And after that, I got married in April of 2019. So there was a very short time period of wedding planning. And when I say my wedding was my mom's wedding, it very much was. It was her glamorous, luxurious, opulent affair. And we fought the entire time during the wedding planning about everything. You name it, we fought about it. I'll give you an example of one thing that happened. We were looking at invitations, and we had gone to different vendors. And at every vendor that we went to, there was the same exact invitation that we really liked. And it finally came down to put down deposit and place the order. And we had seen this invitation 2, 3, 4 times already. We agreed on it. The day I was supposed to put down deposit, she calls me. She says, "You are not to buy that invitation." In my mind, I'm like, well, why? Like, we agreed on this. I literally have a check written out. I'm ready to go. Nope, it's ugly. I don't want it. It's not going to be affiliated with this wedding in any way. Absolutely not. In my mind, I'm like, nope, that's my mom being very difficult. Now looking back, I understand this was the disease talking.
So she had forgotten. Is that what happened? She forgot.
She either forgot or she just didn't understand it, or something wasn't clicking in her head about it.
She didn't recognize that's the one she liked.
Right.
A week before or whatever.
Right. Then I remember we went, the day we went shopping for my wedding shoes, I had told her, because she was so stressed out with the wedding, I told her my bridesmaids are going to plan my shower so that she can just chill, not have another thing to plan. She said, okay, great. I don't even have to spend the money. Fine. That following week, I had my bridesmaids reach out to her with some of the details about my shower. I get the call. How dare you plan your shower without me? I'm like, we had this whole discussion. We were on the subway in Manhattan.
Wow.
So again, now I know that was FTD.
But back then when it happened,
I thought it was my mom being a pain.
Okay.
Because this was very true to who she was.
Right.
Very, very true. And I was like, oh, she's being a bridezilla again, or a momzilla.
Yeah.
And we fought and fought and fought, and it was just never ending. August of 2019, I'm married for 4 months then, my relationship ends. Due to addiction and violence and just not good stuff. And there was a time period then where we tried to salvage the relationship. My mom even got involved. She went to meet with my ex-husband to see if there was anything left. And that fall, I had made the decision, no, I have to go through with divorce because there's no future here. I can't have children. This will never be, my life partner.
And this is still fall of 2019.
This is fall of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, I made that decision November of 2019.
Right.
In December of 2019, my divorce process started with the attorneys and figuring out, plethora of assets you can have in a 4-month marriage, and figuring out who gets what and just finalizing it. Between December of 2019 and March of 2020, when I was supposed to sign divorce papers, my mom started obsessively calling me, asking if I spoke to my ex-husband, who I had a restraining order against, asking if I spoke to his mother, don't know why. And there were times that she would demand I get back together with him, or at least try to.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to her, how dare you tell me that when you know what I went through with him? And we fought, and it got really bad. That by February of 2020, I ended up cutting ties with my parents. I needed to move on. I needed to heal. I needed to get my life back together. And I couldn't have what felt like someone was beating down on me about getting back together with my ex-husband. I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to move forward. So I had to cut ties. Then I was supposed to sign divorce papers on March 18th, 2020. That got canceled because this lovely thing called COVID happened. And everything got locked down. And it was like the second COVID hit, my mom spiraled. She was a creature of habit. She would wake up. She took the same train into Manhattan every single day for work. She worked in the garment district, which is actually where we're sitting right now. She worked here. And, you know, she had the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She would come home from work. She would go to the gym. She would watch her shows. And it was rinse and repeat every single day. And something happened that kind of, you know, took the rug right out from under her. And my dad, who also worked full-time in Manhattan, was now spending all the time with my mom in the same household. And he started noticing that she was getting weird.
Because he was just around her more to observe, right?
Yeah. Because, you know, they would both go to work. They would work like a 9 to 5, come home. By the time they come home, 6:30. What are you spending 4 hours together before going to sleep and then doing the same thing the next day? Now, I wasn't talking to my parents at this time. I was in my own apartment. I got really close with my grandmother, my dad's mom. So I would have conversations with her daily, and then she'd call and report to my parents that, like, I'm okay. Then what started happening is she started reporting to me that something is up with my mom. Me being me, I'm like, I told you something is wrong with her. We didn't know what. And my mom, because she would work out every day, started going to the high school track to, you know, power walk laps around it for exercise.
Because it was COVID and she couldn't
Right,
go to
there
the
was no
gym.
gyms.
Okay.
That when she was out for, you know, the hour, she would ask my dad to monitor her emails from work. And he saw that some things she was sending weren't making sense. Like her boss would email her something, she'd reply, and something wasn't aligning. So he noticed something was off. Then, at some point, she lost her job. I think her office briefly opened up over COVID. She went in, she lost her job. It's still unclear how that happened. Now it's May of 2020, deep into COVID. I lost my job because of COVID. I got laid off. I called my grandma, I told her. Sure enough, she called my parents and told them. And that day, it was Cinco de Mayo, it was May 5th of 2020. I went for a really long walk to, you know, get my head straight and thoughts together because I was devastated. I come home to my apartment and my parents are standing outside. I hadn't seen my mom since January. I haven't spoken to either of them since February. My dad texted me a couple of times over beginning of quarantine to see if I was fine. I let them in, you know, stay 6 feet away from me. The look that my mom had on her face, it wasn't her. You know, they were asking me if I'm okay, what my game plan is. My mom was there. I had cardio equipment. She hopped on it. She was like doing cardio. And my dad is trying to talk to me about this job situation. And then she went and she started picking up my weights and lifting them. And then she started asking me questions like, how long have you worked at your job? How long have you lived in this apartment?
Wow.
And I remember they left and I texted my dad. I go, she needs a doctor. Things got a little bit worse. And by August of 2020, we had a bunch of doctor's appointments lined up for her. all the neurological testing, spinal taps, the CAT scans, MRIs, you name it.
Let me ask you something there. Did the doctors right away just take your word for it that something was going on? Did you have to do any convincing?
I had to convince my dad to make the appointments.
Okay. But with the doctors, were they like, oh, we think she's just fine? Or did they know right away something was up?
Originally, they thought it was a bad case of depression.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because also...
It happens a lot.
Yeah, my mom took my divorce very hard.
Okay.
In my mind, I thought it was because she put on this opulent affair and then she was embarrassed to say that it ended so soon.
Okay.
And we thought that she just got really depressed.
Right.
And had maybe other mental health issues. She was always like an anxious person. So they tested her for all these things. They're like, okay, you know, her serotonin levels are a little bit low. We'll give her some Zoloft. Maybe it'll be better. And then the psychiatrist forwarded us to a neurologist where they did more cognitive testing, and she couldn't do simple things like connect the dots. And that's when my dad realized something is way off here.
So if you hadn't convinced your dad, and this happens a lot, what I think you just said, though, is that if you didn't convince your dad to get her tested, he might have waited a lot longer.
Yeah. It wasn't just me convincing him to get her tested. It was a lot of family members that saw that she was off.
Yeah.
Like, she was just not herself.
Yeah.
I remember they came to visit me. This is after we, reconciled and kissed and made up.
Right.
They came to visit me in my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was August of 2020. This is around the time that all the doctor's appointments were happening.
Yeah.
We went out to dinner. And this is COVID, so it was only outdoor dining. My mom kept insisting to sit inside. Like, she couldn't get it.
Wow.
And she was also almost like manically happy. And it was just very unlike her. And I didn't know if it was because she hadn't seen me in a while. We hadn't spoken in a while. But no, like, something very serious was going on. And then based on all of the testing, we get this diagnosis of FTD.
Did you know what it was before you got?
No idea. We had no idea. I remember it was a Friday. I was out with my girlfriends that night, sitting at a bar, Googling FTD and seeing life expectancy. And I'm like, no, she's perfectly fine. She's perfectly healthy. She's in great shape. She eats healthy. She works out. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then, this is what gets fun. We had a neurologist say, it's not FTD.
After you're adjusted to the fact, after you're preparing yourself for worst case, then they say it's not.
Well, look, when you get a terminal diagnosis like this, wouldn't you want to get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion?
Yeah.
So we took her for a million different opinions at different hospitals to see what everyone had to say. Mm-hmm. Everyone was more or less saying the same thing, except for one doctor. And she told us that it's not FTD and that it's autoimmune encephalitis, a disease of the blood. And it's like an infection in the blood. It masks dementia symptoms. And once we flush it all out, she should be able to go back to normal. Now, when every doctor is telling you, oh, it's FTD, and you have one doctor that says there might be a chance, you go with that one doctor. And we ended up hospitalizing my mom for 9 days to flush out all of her blood. She was put on the machine for a couple of hours. It was almost like a dialysis machine. My dad lived in the hospital with her for the whole 9 days, sleeping on a chair. He went home, he cooked her homemade meals, brought them to her. I came to the hospital, other family members came to visit. And the doctor said that once she was released, she would instantly be better. Like, we would be able to see how much better she was doing. She was there for 9 days. I was there on the day she came home. I brought flowers. I asked how she felt. She said she felt great. And that was it. There was no progress. Nothing got better. Called the doctor again. She's like, oh, well, we can try this and this. And if that doesn't work, we can try chemo, because apparently some chemo treatments help with it. And at some point, enough is enough. And you just have to accept the reality. So that's when FTD really started setting in.